Will there be any Force users in Star Wars Resistance? Could Kazuda Xiono have Force powers? Might we see Kylo Ren or Luke Skywalker in Star Wars Resistance? I share thoughts on this and more, but first I want to say I'm Mike and welcome you back to Force Within TV, where we love the anticipation and speculation that leads up to Star Wars releases, so join us by subscribing and answering the question of the day at the end of the video. But getting back on track here, I've taken your comments on this topic, and the first one I have here is from Jay Mikowski, and he says, I think it will be a huge accomplishment if Lucasfilm doesn't include a Force user in an animation series. Of course, we will see Kylo Ren, but hopefully we won't see any Force powers. And Jay, I hadn't really thought that we were going to see Kylo Ren for sure, though I suppose if we're going to see Phasma and possibly Captain Cardinal in the First Order, their side of things at least, then we may actually see Kylo Ren as well. It would be very early on in his First Order career, and I'm betting that it probably wouldn't happen until, say, at least season 2 or 3 of the show. Thanks for that one, Jay. Cool idea. Let's move on to Chrissy Tilliman, and she says that she'd like to see a Force wielder like Ezra and Rebels. And that really brings me back to that question I asked at the beginning of this video. Is Kazuda Xiono going to be Force sensitive? And no, I don't think he is. It would be interesting if, say, by season 4 he discovers he's Force sensitive, but I don't think we're going to get anybody, unfortunately, Chrissy, just like Ezra. Moving on to Did Monkey here, he says, I'm hoping there is a Force user, but knowing this is a Starfighter TV series, I'm going to say no. And yeah, Did Monkey, I think you could be right. It doesn't make a lot of sense to bring Force user character like a Jedi into this point in the timeline. But as I've mentioned before, we could see a group of aliens that help Kazuda Xiono discover the First Order, and they could be very attuned with the Force and actually help him become more attuned with the Force, sort of like Chirrut Inway is as a Guardian of the Whills. He's not Force sensitive, but he is very attuned with the Force. I think that would be really cool, and we could see Kazuda Xiono really become an amazing starfighter if he was able to connect more with the Force as he progresses through the seasons. Let's move on next to Medieval Man 9, and he says, I don't think there will be a Force user in Resistance. That doesn't mean, however, that there won't be someone who is Force sensitive, and that's why they're a very good pilot. I can't shake the feeling that Kazuda is going to be able to tap into his or her Force potential. Kazuda won't be able to become a full-fledged Jedi, but that Force sensitivity is why he or she is able to be such a great stunt or racing pilot prior to being recruited by the Resistance. And if I'm to be frank here, I'm not sure I want a Force user in Resistance. Aside from the fact that it would be interesting to see the state of the galaxy from a normal person's perspective, there is also the fact that Dave Filoni appears to not be as closely involved with the production of Resistance as he was with the Clone Wars and Rebels. This guy is clearly in love with the whole concept of the Force, and in his hands we've seen new revelations and insights that have blown our minds. I'm not sure anyone else can come close to matching him when it comes to lore of the Force. I don't want anyone to tackle it, make a mistake, and have it taint the rest of the series. Better to wait until Filoni trains a successor who can follow in his footsteps and continue with treating the Force with the relevance it deserves. Thanks so much for that great comment, Medieval Man 9, as always. For anyone who hasn't heard the latest news, Kazuda has been confirmed as a male by leaked concept art. I'll have that video linked up top. And again, I really like the idea of Kazuda being just a normal guy, taking a look at the galaxy, what's happening, seeing it through his eyes, maybe seeing the Force through his eyes. Perhaps there's some sort of master or Yoda type character that he discovers and allows him to become in tune with the Force. I love that idea. I mean, I'm not going to hate this series if it doesn't happen. Plus, I have to agree there really isn't anybody else out there that knows the Force like Dave Filoni. Though I would say that Rian Johnson in The Last Jedi did show a pretty deep understanding of what the Force truly is, and has talked a lot about how it isn't just a superpower like unfortunately a lot of fanboys view it. So thanks for that comment, Medieval Man 9, and now let's move on to another comment by Crisis Among Infinite Darth ACs. He says, yes, I believe we are going to get a newly created Force user in Star Wars Resistance. Even in Solo, Lucasfilm managed to sneak a Force user in the form of Maul. If it is Kazuda, however, I doubt he will be using a lightsaber much. Instead, he would probably use his connection to the Force solely for piloting and dogfighting, like Luke with the first Death Star in A New Hope, and Anakin in the pod racing scene in The Phantom Menace. And yeah, that's a really good point. Just because Kazuda Xiono may be Force sensitive, even slightly Force sensitive, doesn't mean that he needs to be running around like a Jedi with a lightsaber. He might be able to tap into the Force, and that's what makes him such a great pilot. Though I think it was in last week that I mentioned that I don't really want Kazuda Xiono to be another amazing pilot like Hera Syndulla or Han Solo, Poe Dameron. It'd be cool if he had something else that made him special, like the fact that he's able to really curtail his starfighter in some way. But we also have a comment here by Turkland TV, and he says, I don't think Force users will have a big impact on the show. I see them including the few that still exist at given moments when considered appropriate. But the focus will mostly lay on the fighter pilots of the Resistance as well as the First Order, as well as Phasma. So yes, we will see Force users, but only on rare occasions, so I guess it'll be worth it every time they appear. Thanks a lot for that comment, Turkland TV. And the last part there where you're talking about the Force users just showing up occasionally, it reminded me of Star Wars Rebels, and when we occasionally see the Inquisitors pop up, we occasionally see Ahsoka pop in and out, and really throughout that series we just occasionally get more about the Force in that lore, but that's not the central point of the entire series. And here in Resistance, I feel like they'll again come back to that formula where we will be learning things about the Force, or we'll be getting glimpses into Kylo Ren and his background, or maybe Luke Skywalker, or maybe, like I've already mentioned in the video, we get to see an entirely new culture in their lifestyle around the Force. And they'll be helping out Kazuda Xiono connect to the Force and become an even better pilot. Up next, we have Trisan saying, I think there will be a Force user in Star Wars Resistance. Firstly, Leia is bound to show up, at least occasionally, but I think that the Force is such an integral part of Star Wars lore that any long-running series couldn't hope to go on without it for long. So whether the cast ends up chasing after some mystery of the Force, uncovering a group of Darksiders, or having a member of the cast be Force sensitive, it will make its way into the series somehow. I do doubt that any main characters will be Jedi though. I think it would be interesting to explore some of the other groups with their own philosophy and connection to the Force, like the Lasat, Night Sisters, and that species that Jar Jar and Mace Windu visited in the Lost Missions Clone Wars season. Personally, I'm hoping for something like that. And yeah, as I've already mentioned, I'm also hoping for something like that, where we get this new species or a new culture that is already connected to the Force, and we get to learn about the Force through them and Kazuda Xiono's interaction with them. And I totally agree, the Force is just part of Star Wars. I mean, we did have Solo, which doesn't have much to do with the Force, but Dave Filoni is part of this project, so there's no way that we aren't going to learn a little bit more about the Force. Thanks to all of you who comment on the videos, especially those who respond to the question of the day. And remember to use the Force within you to make the Star Wars community a better place. Share your speculation and theories and support those who do the same. And you can start by sharing your thoughts on today's question of the day. Will Kazuda Xiono discover Star Killer Base? Let me know in the comments below, and may the Force be with you.